Before this story begins, take a breath and stay until the end. Every second holds a truth I never saw coming. If stories about love, loss, and the weight of promises still move something inside you, subscribe, leave your mark in the comments, and let's keep this memory alive, together. I still remember the sound of the wind that night, how it screamed through the cracks of our old farmhouse, like it was mourning with me. The snow was falling sideways, thick and heavy, covering everything in white silence. My mother stood by the window, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on the road that led to nowhere. He had promised he'd return before winter, but winter came, and he never did. I was 12, too young to understand the weight of promises, too old to still believe in magic. My father's absence was not new to us. He'd been leaving for work since I could remember. But this time felt different. He'd looked at me before he left, his eyes tired but kind, and said, "Keep her safe, son. I'll be back before the snow settles." It was the last thing he ever said to me. The first weeks were filled with letters, short ones, written in his hurried scrawl. He spoke of long nights, of missing home, of money coming soon. But by January, the letters stopped. My mother told me not to worry. "He's just busy," she said, her voice too steady, her smile too rehearsed. But I could hear her crying at night, muffled behind the bathroom door. The sound of her sobs became the rhythm of our winter. By February, the cold had settled inside the house, not just in the walls but in our hearts. We couldn't afford heating oil anymore. I started chopping wood behind the barn, my fingers raw and bleeding, just to keep the fire going. Sometimes I'd imagine him walking up that dirt road, his boots crunching in the snow, calling my name like he used to. But the road remained empty, swallowed by white and silence. When spring came, the snow melted, but the cold stayed. The neighbors stopped asking about him. My mother stopped waiting by the window. She sold his tools, his old truck, even the watch he'd left behind on the nightstand. "We have to move on," she said. But I couldn't. Every sound, the door creak, the wind against the roof, the smell of his jacket still hanging by the door kept him alive for me. Then one night, I overheard a phone call. I wasn't supposed to. She was in the kitchen, whispering in that sharp tone she used only when she was hiding something. "No, he can't know," she said. "He still believes." I froze in the hallway. The voice on the other end was low, male, unfamiliar. "It's better this way," he said. "He'll find out eventually." My stomach twisted. I wanted to rush in, demand answers, but my body wouldn't move. I stood there barefoot on the cold floor, realizing that maybe the truth wasn't that my father was lost, it was that someone didn't want him found. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. Pancakes, orange juice, a forced smile. "You slept well?" she asked. I nodded. I wanted to ask who had called, but her eyes told me not to. There was fear there, real fear, and something else, guilt. For years, I tried to bury that night. But the memory followed me like a shadow. I grew up, left home, built a life in the city. Yet every time winter came, I felt that same ache in my chest. I still saw his face when I closed my eyes. I still heard his promise. And somewhere, deep inside, a voice whispered what I never dared to say out loud. Maybe he never left because he wanted to. Maybe he never came back because he couldn't. 20 years later, I returned to that house. The paint was peeling, the roof sagging, the barn long gone. My mother was older, smaller somehow, as if time had been eating away at her. When she saw me, she smiled, but her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before: fear again. The kind that hides behind decades of silence. "Why now?" she asked. "Because it's almost winter," I said. "And I need to know." The smell of the old house hit me the moment I stepped inside: dust, pine, and something faintly metallic, like rust and regret. Everything was exactly as I remembered it, only smaller. The walls seemed to lean inward now, heavy with secrets. My mother's hands shook as she poured coffee into chipped cups. She spoke about the weather, about the neighbor's son getting married, about everything except him. I watched her the way you watch a stranger you once loved. She had the same habit of tucking her hair behind her ear, but her eyes had lost their color, like winter skies that never clear. The silence between us grew thick. Finally, I said, "I found the box." She froze. I hadn't meant to start that way, but it slipped out. A week before I came, I'd gone through the attic dust-covered trunks, forgotten photo albums, and one box sealed with old tape. Inside were the letters. Dozens of them. My father's handwriting, yes, but something was off. The tone, the words, the timing. The postmarks didn't match the dates he mentioned. And one of them dated 3 months after he disappeared had a return address from only 2 towns away. When I told her, the cup in her hand rattled against the saucer. "You shouldn't dig up ghosts," she whispered. "I'm not digging up ghosts," I said quietly. "I'm digging up the truth." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she looked afraid of me. She stood slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter the air between us. "He left us," she said. "He wasn't the man you think he was." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her voice didn't sound like anger, it sounded like defense. I took one of the letters from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table. "Did you write this?" She stared at it but didn't touch it. The handwriting was almost perfect, but not quite. I'd compared it to his old notes, the way he looped his G's, the slight slant of his N's. These were copies, mimics. Someone had written them to keep me believing he was still out there. "Why?" I asked. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. "Because you needed him," she said. "And I needed you to survive." It felt like someone had struck me. My chest tightened, breath shallow. I stood, pacing the kitchen, my boots echoing on the wood floor. "So you lied. 4 years. You let me think he was alive." She looked at me with a pain I can't describe. "He was alive," she said softly. "Just not the way you remember." Her words tangled in my head. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but something stopped me the way her voice broke on the last word. She turned away, walked to the window, and whispered, "He made mistakes, son. Terrible ones." "What kind of mistakes?" She didn't answer. Outside, the wind had started to rise again, just like that night long ago. It howled through the bare trees, bending them, almost as if nature itself was straining to hear. I took another letter from the box and turned it over. The back was sealed with a thin line of wax, a detail my father never used. And under the flap, written faintly in pencil, was a number. A phone number. Local. I copied it down, my hands shaking. "Whose number is this?" I asked. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, I saw the truth flicker across her face. "Don't call it," she whispered. But I already knew I would. That night, I sat alone in my old room. The wallpaper was peeling, the smell of old wood thick in the air. I stared at that number until the digits blurred. My hands trembled as I dialed, 1 ring. 2. Then a click. "Who is this?" a man's voice said. Deep, steady, unfamiliar. I swallowed hard. "I'm looking for someone. My name is Nathan Hale." "I think you knew my father, Samuel Hale." Silence. Then a slow exhale. "I wondered when you'd call," the man said. "Who are you?" "Someone who owed your father a debt." I sat up. "Is he alive?" The man laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Alive," he said. "Not in the way you think." My throat went dry. "What does that mean?" "You should come see for yourself," he said. "But not there. Meet me at the docks. Tomorrow, midnight. Bring the letters." Before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, the hum of the dial tone filling the silence. For the first time in 20 years, I felt something shift inside me. Hope, fear. I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing. The winter I'd been waiting to end wasn't over yet. And maybe it never would be. The air down by the docks always smelled the same salt, metal, and old secrets. The kind that clung to your clothes and followed you home. I hadn't been there in years, not since I was a boy helping my father haul crates for a few extra dollars. Back then, the docks were alive, men shouting, ships moaning, ropes snapping under the weight of the tide. But that night, everything was still, dead quiet. Even the water seemed to be holding its breath. I parked under a broken street light, the engine ticking as it cooled. Midnight. The world felt suspended, caught somewhere between past and present. I had the letters with me, bundled in an old leather strap, their paper yellowed, their words suddenly heavier than I could bear. A fog rolled in from the harbour, swallowing the pier one shadow at a time. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking, my boots echoing against the wooden planks. Every creak felt like a warning. Somewhere in the distance, a buoy bell clanged lazily, marking time. Then I saw him. He stood near the edge, where the last post jutted out into the water. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat that swayed in the wind. His face was half hidden by the hood, but even from a distance, there was something unsettlingly familiar about his posture, like someone who'd carried too many regrets for too long. "You came," he said when I was close enough to hear. His voice was the same one from the phone, steady, low, measured. "You said you knew my father," I replied. My words sounded smaller than I meant them to. He nodded, glancing at the bundle in my hand. "You brought them, the letters, yeah. Now tell me why you sent me here. Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face the water, his breath misting in the cold air. "Your father was a good man," he said finally. "Until he wasn't." I waited, my heart pounding. "He got involved with people he shouldn't have," the man continued. "At first, it was about money. Then it became about silence. He made a deal, one that went bad fast. When he tried to walk away, they made sure he couldn't." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. The man turned. For the first time, I saw his face under the flickering light, a scar cutting across his cheek, eyes that looked like they hadn't seen rest in decades. "You ever heard of Blackridge Freight?" he asked. I frowned. "The shipping company? They went under years ago," he smirked. "That's what they said in the papers. But it wasn't bankruptcy that killed it. It was a cover-up. Your father found out they were moving things that weren't supposed to exist, military parts, unregistered weapons. He threatened to go to the authorities." The words hit me like cold water. "My father was a mechanic," I said. "He fixed trucks." "He didn't. He was more than that," the man interrupted. "He was the one keeping the engines running on their transport fleet. He knew too much." I felt dizzy. "So what happened to him?" The man looked past me, toward the dark horizon. "He disappeared the night he tried to run. Said he'd meet me here, at these docks. Said he'd bring something they wanted back, a ledger, proof. But he never showed." My breath caught. "And you think they killed him?" The man didn't answer. He reached into his coat and pulled something out, an envelope, thick and creased with age. "He left this with me," he said. "Told me to give it to you, if you ever came looking." I hesitated before taking it. The paper was soft from years of being handled. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. I didn't realize I was shaking until I tried to open it. Inside was a single photograph, faded, edges curled. It showed my father standing beside another man in front of a truck marked Blackridge Freight. And behind them, in the corner of the frame, was someone else. Someone I recognized. My mother. She looked younger, but unmistakable, smiling, holding a clipboard, wearing a company badge. My stomach twisted. "Why is she in this?" I whispered. The man exhaled slowly. "Because she wasn't just his wife, son. She was one of them." I staggered back, the fog spinning around me. "You're lying," I said, my voice breaking. "She would never." He stepped closer, eyes hard. "You think those letters came from nowhere? You think she didn't know where he went? She knew everything." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to deny it. But deep down, the pieces began to fit together, the phone call, the fear in her eyes, the years of silence. She tried to protect you, he said quietly. That's why she lied. But the truth has a way of finding its way home. I stood there shaking, the cold biting through my gloves. The photograph trembled in my hands. Where is he? I finally asked. The man hesitated. If you want to find him, he said, you'll need to go where it all started. Where's that? He turned and began to walk away, his boots echoing over the wood. Blackridge, he said over his shoulder. What's left of it? The fog swallowed him before I could say another word. I stood alone at the edge of the pier, clutching the photo and the letters, listening to the water slap against the posts below. Somewhere out there, buried beneath 2 decades of lies, was the truth. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to face it. The road to Blackridge was the kind of road that didn't appear on most maps any more narrow, cracked, overgrown by time and neglect. The kind of road people forgot on purpose. I left at dawn, the sky still bruised from the night, the world caught between darkness and light. The photograph lay on the passenger seat, its edges curled like it was trying to fold in on itself. My father, my mother, the company that ruined them both. The drive was for ours, but it felt longer. Every mile dragged me deeper into the past. The landscape changed slowly from rolling fields to empty factories, from small towns to stretches of nothing. The signs for Blackridge Industrial Zone were rusted and half-fallen, bullet holes marking the metal like old scars. By the time I reached the main gate, the sun was high, but the place still looked asleep. The entrance was chained, the guardhouse collapsed. The smell of oil and decay hung heavy in the air. I climbed over the gate, my boots crunching on gravel, and walked toward the main warehouse. Every step echoed, as if the place itself remembered the men who once worked there, the trucks that once rolled out in the night carrying things no one was supposed to see. Inside, it was colder than outside. Sunlight streamed through broken windows in long, dusty columns. Old machinery stood silent, wrapped in cobwebs. A calendar on the wall still read 1998. I ran my hand across a metal desk, leaving a clean streak in the dust. On the floor, I noticed faint tire tracks, fresh ones. Someone had been here. I crouched, touching the marks. They were recent, less than a week old, maybe days. My heart quickened. I followed them toward the back of the warehouse, where the concrete floor turned to dirt. A heavy metal door was half open, leading into an underground corridor. I hesitated. My father's voice echoed in my head, "Keep her safe, son. I'll be back before the snow settles." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The corridor smelled of damp earth and gasoline. Bare bulbs hung from the ceiling, some still flickering weakly. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My footsteps were the only sound until I reached a small room at the end. It looked like an office, filing cabinets, a desk, papers scattered everywhere. On the wall, a faded logo, Blackridge Freight, Logistics and Supply. I started going through the drawers. Old invoices, manifests, lists of serial numbers, all meaningless until one folder caught my eye. It was labeled SH12, confidential. Inside were copies of shipment orders signed by Samuel Hale. My father's name. But the destination wasn't listed, it had been blacked out with thick ink. At the bottom of one page, a note was scrawled in pencil, "Not safe. Keep him quiet." My stomach turned. I flipped through more papers until I found a second note, written in a different hand. My mother's. I'd know that handwriting anywhere. "Don't hurt him. I'll take care of the boy." I dropped the file. The room seemed to tilt, the air suddenly to thin. My mother hadn't just known, she'd been part of it. Part of whatever took him from us. A sound behind me snapped me back. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I turned, but the hallway was empty. "Hello," my voice came out weaker than I wanted. No answer. I took a few steps back toward the corridor, my pulse racing. The door creaked. Then movement, a shadow at the far end. Someone watching me. "Who's there?" I called. Nothing. Just silence. Then the light above me flickered out. Another followed. Then another. Darkness swallowed the corridor one bulb at a time, moving toward me like a slow, deliberate countdown. I ran, the sound of my boots on concrete echoed, mixed with the pounding of my heartbeat. I reached the exit, shoved the door open, and stumbled back into the daylight, gasping. The air felt too bright, too sharp. For a moment, I thought I was alone until I saw it. A car parked by the fence. A black sedan, engine idling. The same one that had been parked near my mother's house the day I left. The driver's window rolled down. A woman's voice called out, "You shouldn't have come here, Nathan." My throat went dry. Mom, she stepped out of the car, her coat whipping in the wind. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "You found the file." I nodded. My voice shook when I spoke. "What did you do?" She looked older than ever, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. "Everything I had to," she said. "To keep you alive." "Alive from what?" I asked. "From your father," she said. The words hit me harder than a blow. "What are you talking about?" "You said he was." She shook her head. "You never knew him, Nathan." "Not really. He wasn't the man you remember. He got involved with people who didn't just move weapons. They made them, tested them. On people." I stared at her, disbelief and nausea fighting inside me. "That's impossible." "I wish it were." I took a step closer. "You helped them." Tears welled in her eyes. "I helped stop him." I felt the ground tilt under me. The world suddenly didn't make sense. All the years of silence, the fear, the lies. It wasn't about losing him. It was about hiding him. I looked back at the warehouse, then at her. "Where is he?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, as if someone might be listening. "Gone," she whispered. "But not dead." My breath caught. She met my eyes. "If you keep looking, Nathan, you'll end up like him. Don't let the truth take you, too." Before I could say another word, she got back into the car. The tires spun on gravel, the black sedan disappearing into the distance, swallowed by dust. I stood there alone, the sound of the engine fading into the wind. Gone, but not dead. Her words echoed through me, colder than any winter I'd ever known. I didn't drive straight home. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much to hold the wheel steady, and my mind felt like a storm that wouldn't stop moving. Gone, but not dead. The words kept replaying, over and over, until they didn't sound like words anymore, just an ache that grew louder with every mile. By the time I reached the motel off Route 7, the sun had dipped behind the hills, painting everything in a dull orange haze. I checked into the first room they offered, number 12, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a flickering sign outside that buzzed all night. I dropped my bag, sat on the bed, and unfolded the photograph again. My father's smile looked different now, forced maybe, or guilty. And my mother, she wasn't just standing beside him, she was standing with him. Partners. Co-conspirators. Whatever this was, they were both in it together. I turned on the small lamp by the bed and pulled the letters from my coat pocket. For years, they'd been sacred to me, the only connection to a man I'd worshipped. But now, holding them under the yellow light, I saw them for what they really were, stories. Fabricated memories. A script written to keep me believing. I started sorting through them again, one by one. December 12, 2003. February 8, 2004. March 1st in March. That was the last one. I traced the ink with my finger, reading the final line aloud, voice breaking as I said it. "When the ice melts, I'll be home." It was the kind of thing only a liar could write. I threw the letters onto the floor. They scattered across the carpet like pieces of someone else's life. Then my phone buzzed. No number. Just unknown caller. I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen before I answered. Hello, silence. Then a breath, soft, ragged. Nathan, my entire body froze. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years, but I knew it instantly. "Dad," the line crackled. "You shouldn't have gone there." My chest tightened. I stood up, pacing. "Where are you? What is this? You were supposed to stay away," he said. His voice was weaker than I remembered, but it was him. Every syllable hit like a pulse of memory. Late nights by the fireplace, stories about the sea, that rough laugh that used to make me feel safe. "Mom said you're alive." He paused. "She said too much. I deserve to know the truth," I shouted. "You left us. You left me. I spent my life thinking you were dead." The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear him breathing, slow, pained. "I left to protect you," he said finally. "I made mistakes. Things you can't fix by knowing." "Tell me what happened," I demanded. "Tell me the truth." He exhaled, the sound trembling. "If I tell you, they'll come for you too." "Who are they?" "The same ones who owned me," he said. "The same ones your mother worked for. The ones who made sure you grew up believing I was a ghost." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "Then why call me now?" "Because they're closing in," he said. "And I can't run anymore." My breath caught. "Where are you?" "Not far." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You'll find me where the river meets the tracks. Bring the photograph." "Come alone." Before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the hum of the neon sign outside bleeding through the thin walls. I didn't know if it was a trap, or a cry for help, or both, but I knew I was going. I couldn't not go. 2 hours later, I was back on the road. The moon hung low, pale and watchful. The place he'd described wasn't far, an old railway junction on the edge of town, long abandoned, where the river curved beneath a crumbling bridge. I parked a few meters away, killed the headlights, and stepped out into the night. The air smelled of wet earth and iron. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, faint, haunting. I followed the dirt path down toward the riverbank, the photograph in my pocket, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw him, a figure sitting near the bridge supports, half hidden in shadow. His clothes were worn, his beard streaked with grey. When he turned toward me, the world seemed to stop. His eyes, my eyes, met mine. "Dad," I whispered. He smiled weakly. "You look just like her." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I walked closer, my hands trembling. "I thought you were dead. Some days," he said quietly, "I wished I was." The sound of his voice cracked something open inside me, all the years of anger, grief, confusion, collapsing into one unbearable ache. I wanted to hug him, hit him, scream, cry. But all I could say was, "Why?" He looked past me, toward the river. "Because I did something I couldn't undo. And the only way to save you was to disappear." "What did you do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small notebook, bound in cracked leather. "Your mother tried to destroy this," he said, handing it to me. "It's the ledger they were after, the proof of what Blackridge was really doing." I opened it, flipping through the pages. Numbers, names, shipments, coded entries that made no sense to me. "Why would she try to destroy it? She wasn't protecting me," he said. "She was protecting them." Before I could respond, headlights cut through the trees behind us. The roar of an engine shattered the quiet. His expression changed instantly. "Run," he said. "What?" He grabbed my arm. "Go, Nathan." They found me. I looked back, seeing two black SUVs tearing down the dirt road, lights flashing. My father shoved me toward the trees. "Go," he shouted. "Come with me. If you're still here, maybe you felt it too, that silence between what we lose and what we pretend to forget. Don't let this moment fade. Hit like, share your thoughts below, and tell me, who would you wait for before winter ends?" He shook his head. "I can't. Not this time." Then I heard the first gunshot. It echoed across the water, sharp and final. I turned once, saw him standing by the bridge, his coat whipping in the wind, and then another shot rang out. He staggered, fell. Dad, I ran toward him, but the world dissolved into chaos, shouting voices, the blinding glare of headlights, my breath tearing in my chest. Someone grabbed me, pulling me down into the brush. I didn't see their face, only heard their whisper, urgent and cold, "If you want to live, don't move." The last thing I saw before everything went black was my father's body by the river, still, silent, and the photograph fluttering from my pocket, carried away by the wind. When I woke, the first thing I heard was water. Slow, steady, endless. The second was silence, that heavy kind of silence that comes after something you can't take back. I was lying in a small cabin, the air damp and cold, my clothes still clinging to me like they'd been soaked. Someone had dragged me out of the river. I sat up too fast, my head spinning. The room swam in front of me, rough wooden walls, a single lantern burning low, a folded blanket on the floor. My throat burned when I spoke. "Hello," footsteps creaked behind me. "Don't move," a voice said. It was a woman's voice, calm, deliberate. I turned slowly. She was standing by the door, wearing a heavy coat, her hair pulled back. Her eyes were sharp, but not cruel. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. "Who are you?" She didn't answer right away. She set a cup of water on the table beside me and said, "Drink." "You were in that river all night." I looked down. My hands were bruised, scraped. There was mud on my jacket and blood on my sleeve, not all of it mine. The memories came back in flashes, headlights, shouting, the gunshots. My father falling. I gripped the edge of the bed. "Where is he?" The woman looked away. "Gone," she said. "When I pulled you out, the others were already gone." "So was he." My chest tightened. "He's dead," she hesitated. "That depends on what you mean by dead," I frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" She met my eyes then, and I saw something flicker behind her calm expression. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. "You don't know who your father really was, do you?" "I know enough." "No," she said quietly. "You know the story they let you believe." I stood, my legs unsteady. "Start talking," she sighed, crossed the room, and sat on the other chair. "My name's Claire. I worked for Blackridge once, a long time ago. Your father too. But he wasn't just a mechanic. He was building something. A prototype, an engine that didn't run on fuel, didn't leave a trace. They wanted it for transport. He realized they wanted it for war." Her words came slow, deliberate, like she'd rehearsed them for years. "He tried to stop them," she continued. "Tried to expose what they were doing. But he got caught. They made him vanish. Your mother, she cut a deal to protect you. In exchange, she helped them erase him." I stared at her, the room spinning again. "You're lying." "I wish I was," she said softly. "He escaped years later. He found me. I helped him hide. That's why I was there last night." I sat down, my breath shaking. "Then why did they kill him?" She didn't look away this time. "Because he wouldn't give them the ledger." I reached for my jacket, pulling out the soaked, half-ruined notebook my father had given me. "This," she nodded. "That's what they've been hunting for. Every name, every payment, every shipment, it's all there. Enough to destroy what's left of Blackridge." I flipped it open, the pages warped and stained, the ink smeared from the water. "Then why not take it to the police?" She let out a small, humorless laugh. "You think they'd believe you? Blackridge was the police. The politicians. The contracts, the army. You go to the wrong person, you disappear before the sun comes up." I stared down at the book, my reflection flickering in its wet cover. "He died for this." Claire's voice softened. "He died trying to protect it. And you?" I looked up sharply. "Then why save me?" She hesitated, then reached into her coat. She pulled out something small, a ring. My father's ring. The same one he used to wear when he worked on engines. The one I used to steal and hide just so he'd chase me around the house laughing. "He gave me this the night he disappeared," she said. "Told me to keep it safe. Said his son would need it one day." She placed it in my palm. The metal was cold, heavy. Inside, engraved so small I almost missed it, were the words for Nathan. When winter ends. I swallowed hard. My eyes burned, but I didn't look away. What happens now? I asked. You run, she said. You get as far away from this as you can. Burn the ledger. Forget the name Blackridge. I can't, I said. He didn't die so I could run. She shook her head. You don't understand. They'll never stop. You think they'll let you live with what's in that book? I looked toward the window. The river outside moved slow and silent, its surface reflecting the grey sky. Somewhere beneath it, the current carried the last trace of my father, the man I'd spent my life waiting for, now reduced to whispers and ghosts. I'm not running, I said. Claire stood, her expression unreadable. Then you better start choosing who you trust. Because the moment they realize you have that ledger, you're already dead. She handed me a small folded note. If you ever need to find me, follow the coordinates on this. But only once. If I move again, I won't leave another trail. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back. For what it's worth, she said quietly, your father wasn't the monster they made him out to be. But he wasn't innocent either. Then she was gone. I sat there for a long time, listening to the river outside, the sound of it steady, endless, like it had been carrying his secrets all along. I slipped the ring onto my finger, the metal pressing against my skin like a promise. When I finally stood, the ledger felt heavier in my pocket, the kind of weight you don't carry for long without breaking. By the time I reached the edge of town, the first snow had started to fall. Thick, slow flakes that floated through the headlights, settling on the windshield like ghosts. The road stretched out in front of me, empty, cracked, endless. I hadn't spoken since I left the cabin. My father's ring dug into my finger, the metal cold against my skin. Every few miles I'd catch myself staring at it, like it could answer the questions still spinning in my head. The ledger lay on the passenger seat, wrapped in an old towel. I hadn't opened it again since the river. I was afraid too, afraid of what I'd find inside. By dawn, I'd made it to the outskirts of Hollow Creek, the town where my father was born, where my mother had sworn we'd never return. The sign was half buried in snow, the letters rusted and cracked, population 3,209. That was before the factory closed, before the people left. Now it looked more like 300. I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown diner that looked like it hadn't seen a customer in years. The windows were fogged over, but there was light inside, faint, yellow, tired. I pushed open the door and was hit by the smell of burnt coffee and grease. A woman behind the counter looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to surprise. You look like you've been through hell, she said. Something like that, I answered, taking a seat by the window. She poured coffee without asking. You passing through, maybe, or maybe running from something, she said, studying me. I didn't reply. The steam from the mug fogged my glasses. Outside, the snow fell harder, covering the tracks my car had made. There was a payphone by the restroom door, old, dented, but still working. I slipped a few coins in and dialed a number I hadn't called in over a decade. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, shaky, older, but familiar. Mom, silence. Then Nathan, the air left my lungs. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I need to see you, I said. Her voice trembled. Where are you? Hollow Creek, a pause. Then, almost a whisper, you shouldn't have gone back there, Mom, please. I just need answers, she hesitated. I could hear her breathing, uneven, nervous. They'll find you. They always do. Then tell me what they're looking for. Nathan, her voice cracked. Your father wasn't supposed to survive. None of this was supposed to reach you. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone, my reflection warped in the scratched metal. For a moment, I thought about calling again. Instead, I dropped the receiver and walked out. The snow had covered everything now. The car, the tracks, the past. I drove toward the old neighborhood, the one I hadn't seen since I was 9. The houses were smaller than I remembered, the streets narrower. Our old house still stood, a pale blue structure with boarded windows and a mailbox hanging by one screw. The door creaked open when I pushed it. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, like the walls had been holding their breath for years. Dust coated the furniture, cobwebs hung from the corners. But everything was still there, the clock on the wall, the chipped table, the dent in the hallway where I'd once crashed my bike. And then, on the mantel, I saw it, a photograph in a cracked frame. My father, my mother, and me smiling in front of the old pickup truck. He had his arm around her, and she was looking at him, not the camera. I took the photo down, brushed the dust off the glass. That's when I noticed something, the edge of an envelope taped to the back. I peeled it away carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age. My father's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise. I froze. My hands started to shake. They wanted what I built, not for progress, but for control. They threatened her. They said they'd take you if I didn't give it to them. So I gave them half. The other half I hid where it all began. Under the tree that never dies. The tree that never dies. I knew exactly what he meant. Behind the house, at the edge of the woods, there was an old oak that had stood there for generations. Even during the coldest winters, it never lost all its leaves. My father used to say it was magic. I used to laugh. Now, in the silence of that decaying house, it didn't seem funny anymore. I grabbed a shovel from the shed and made my way through the snow. The wind stung my face, the kind of cold that cuts deep. When I reached the tree, the ground was frozen hard, but I started digging anyway. It took nearly an hour before the shovel hit something solid. A small metal box. I pried it open with my hands. Inside were several film rolls, a small flash drive sealed in plastic, and a note. If they ever tell you I betrayed them, show them this. My pulse quickened. I slipped the drive into my pocket and looked back toward the house. The window upstairs flickered, a shadow moving past. Someone was inside. I ducked behind the tree, my breath visible in the freezing air. Another shadow crossed the window, slow, deliberate. Whoever it was, they weren't looking for shelter. They were looking for me. I crouched low, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the wind. Then, from somewhere near the road, an engine started. Headlights swept across the snow. I didn't wait to see who it was. I ran through the woods, across the frozen field, until the lights disappeared behind the trees. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I pulled out the flash drive. It was cold, slick with frost. Whatever was on it, whatever he'd buried all those years ago, it was the truth he'd died protecting. And now it was mine to finish. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until my hands went numb from gripping the wheel, and the world outside turned into a blur of snow and headlights. Every time I blinked, I saw my father's handwriting burned into my mind, the tree that never dies. And now, the box, the flash drive, the half-truths that never stopped multiplying. By morning, I'd reached a small motel off Highway 17. The neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters burned out so it read MOL. Inside, the clerk didn't even look up from his crossword. I paid cash, took the key, and locked myself in a room that smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes. I sat on the bed, laptop open, staring at the flash drive in my palm. It was small, ordinary, but I could feel the weight of it, not physical, but something else. Something final. When I plugged it in, a folder appeared instantly, Winter 13. Inside, there were hundreds of files, photos, receipts, recordings, memos. But one caught my eye, a single document titled Ledger, Final Copy. My pulse slowed. My fingers hovered over the trackpad before I clicked. The screen filled with names. Hundreds of them. each with dates, wire amounts, account numbers, and a column labeled authorization. At the very bottom, I saw one name I recognized immediately: Eleanor Hayes. My mother. I froze for a moment. I thought maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there was another Eleanor Hayes in their system, but the ID number matched the one on the papers she used to sign at the bank. There was no mistake. She'd been part of it. The woman who had told me my father was dead, who had made me believe he was dangerous, who had built her life on silence and guilt. She hadn't just known the truth, she had helped them bury it. The sound that came out of me was something between a laugh and a gasp. I pushed back from the desk, my chair scraping against the floor. No, I whispered. No, 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 the file was detailed, her payments stretching over years. Consulting, information retrieval, containment, words that meant nothing and yet too much. And then, next to the final entry, $47,000, winter termination. Termination. I stared at the word until it blurred. That's what she'd been paid for. The night he disappeared. The night he promised he'd return before winter. I stood up, shaking. The motel walls felt too close, the air too thin. I paced, my heartbeat loud in my ears. She lied. She lied to protect herself, but then the memory came back, her voice on the phone, trembling. You shouldn't have gone back there. Maybe she wasn't warning me to stay safe. Maybe she was warning me because she knew what I'd find. The next file was a video, dated December 19, 2011, the same winter he vanished. I clicked. The screen flickered, grainy security footage from a warehouse. My father stood in the center of the frame, his face gaunt but determined. Across from him, my mother. She was crying. He said something I couldn't hear, the sound muted, but his expression said enough, pleading, desperate. He reached for her, but she stepped back. A man appeared behind her, placing a gun in her hand. I covered my mouth. She hesitated. He shook his head slowly, mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. Then, quietly, he knelt. And the screen went black. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My heart was a hollow drum inside my chest. She hadn't been paid to betray him. She'd been forced to do it. And he'd let her. He'd made her believe it was the only way to keep me alive. For the first time, I understood the full weight of his promise. He'd return before winter. Maybe he hadn't meant alive. Maybe he'd meant like this. In fragments. In ledgers. In ghosts that refused to stay buried. I stared at the frozen screen until the image faded, replaced by my reflection, pale, broken, haunted. That's when I heard it, a knock. 3 soft raps on the door. I froze. Another knock. I grabbed the flash drive, yanked it from the laptop, and shoved it into my pocket. My mind raced, Claire, or them. The third knock was louder this time. I moved toward the door, careful not to make noise, peering through the peephole. It wasn't Claire. It was a man in a dark coat, his head slightly bowed against the snow. I couldn't see his face. He knocked again, slow, deliberate. Nathan Hayes, he called out, his voice calm, professional. We just need a word. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. No one should have known I was here. I hadn't used a card, hadn't called anyone. The man waited a few seconds, then sighed. All right, he said softly. We can do this the easy way. A metallic click echoed through the air. The door handle twitched. I didn't think, I just ran. Through the bathroom, out the window, into the alley behind the motel. My boots hit the snow hard. Voices shouted behind me. A gunshot cracked the air, sharp, close. I kept running, past dumpsters, through chain-link fences, my breath burning in my lungs. My father's ring cut into my skin as I gripped the flash drive. By the time I reached the highway, the shouts were gone. Only the sound of the wind remained. I stopped by an old service station, crouched behind a rusted gas pump, and finally allowed myself to breathe. I pulled the drive out, holding it tight in my hand. They wanted it because it proved everything, not just their crimes, but hers. My mother's name was the last one on the ledger. And now, for the first time, I understood why she'd told me never to go back. Because some truths don't just destroy the dead, they burn the living too. The wind had picked up, slicing through the night like it carried whispers meant only for the lost. I stayed crouched behind the gas pump until my legs went numb, until the sound of engines faded into the distance. Only then did I stand, the cold biting deep into my fingers. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. The highway stretched out in both directions, swallowed by darkness. I followed the sign that read north to Willow Point. I remembered that name. My father used to take me fishing there when I was a kid, long before the lies started to rot everything we knew. By the time I reached the cabin at Willow Point, dawn was breaking, pale light spilling through the clouds, soft and merciless. The place looked almost exactly the same, weather-beaten planks, a metal roof, a rusted canoe half buried in snow. I pushed open the door. Inside, everything was coated in dust, but the air carried that same faint smell of oil and cedar that I remembered. The firewood was still stacked by the wall. The radio still sat on the counter, covered with a film of frost. For a long time, I just stood there listening to the silence. Then I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and set it on the table. The weight of it seemed heavier now, not just because of what it contained, but because of what it meant. I whispered to the empty room, "You kept your promise, Dad. You came back," but the words tasted hollow. He had come back, in secrets, in pieces, in a truth so broken it barely resembled love anymore. I built a small fire, more for comfort than warmth. The flames licked the air gently, their crackling the only sound breaking through the silence. My thoughts spiraled in loops, my mother's trembling voice, Claire's warning, the video of that night. He hadn't fought her. He'd let her pull the trigger. I couldn't decide if that was mercy or madness. Around noon, I found an old shortwave radio in the corner. It still worked. I tuned through static, my hand shaking. Somewhere between the noise, a faint voice came through, female. "Nathan Hayes. If you're listening, don't go to Willow Point." I froze. The voice was shaky, faint, but I knew it instantly. My mother. "Mom," I said into the microphone. "I'm Mia. Where are you?" Static swallowed my words. Then, barely audible, they found Claire. "She's gone." "Don't." The transmission cut off. The room fell silent again, except for the crackling of the fire. I felt the world tilt. Claire gone. My last thread of truth erased. I grabbed the ledger and opened it to the final pages, flipping through the names again. Halfway down, next to the last transfer under my mother's name, there was a single note in a different handwriting. My father's. "If I don't return, he will know what to do." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Beneath that line, scrawled in the margin, was a code. A series of numbers and letters, coordinates. The same kind of code Claire had given me before she disappeared. I spread an old map on the table and traced the numbers. They pointed to a location deep in the northern woods, just outside the frozen lake, the place we used to call the edge of winter. It was where my father had proposed to my mother. I packed what little I had, the ledger, the flash drive, the ring. The sky had turned a pale grey, the kind that always came before another storm. When I reached the lake, the surface was frozen solid. The wind howled through the trees like something alive. I followed the coordinates until I reached a small outcropping of rock, half covered in snow. There, beneath the ice, I saw it, a dark shape embedded in the frozen ground. I started digging with my bare hands, the ice cutting into my skin. My breath came out in ragged clouds. The more I dug, the clearer it became, a sealed container, the same kind my father used to keep his blueprints in. I cracked it open. Inside were photos, letters, and one cassette tape labeled simply, "For him." I stared at it for a long moment, my throat tightening. Then I slipped it into the recorder I'd brought from the cabin and pressed play. Static. Then his voice. Older. Weaker. But his. If you're hearing this, Nathan, it means the world I built finally collapsed on itself. I tried to fix it. God knows I tried. But I couldn't save both the truth and your mother. He paused. The silence between his words was almost unbearable. She wasn't the enemy. She was the sacrifice. They forced her to choose between me and you. And when she pulled that trigger, it wasn't hatred, it was love. The kind that breaks everything it touches. My chest ached. The fire in my stomach turned to ash. I told you I'd come back before winter, he continued softly. I didn't lie. You were my winter, son. The thing I was running toward, not from. And if you've found this, it means the cycle can finally end. His breathing hitched. Then, burn the ledger. Destroy it. Don't become me. The tape ended with a soft click. I sat there for a long time, the cold gnawing at my hands, the snow piling on my shoulders. Burn the ledger. It was the one thing every person in this story had told me to do. Claire, my mother, now him. And yet every part of me screamed not to. Because if I did, everything they died for would vanish with the smoke. I looked down at the frozen lake, the reflection of the sky fractured across the ice. My father's ring gleamed faintly in the pale light. For the first time in my life, I didn't know whether to hate him or forgive him. I only knew one thing: winter had come. And with it, the truth had finally spoken his name. The fire took hours to catch. The wind fought me for every spark, howling through the cracks of the old chimney like it didn't want to let go. But I didn't stop. I fed the flames until they grew, orange and wild, licking at the darkness. The ledger sat in my lap, worn, soaked, heavy with names. Every page was a life, every number a shadow. My father's last words played over in my head, looping like a curse. Burn the ledger. Don't become me. I stared at it one last time. The handwriting, the ink, the faint smell of oil that still clung to the paper, all of it felt alive, like the heartbeat of a dying machine. I could almost hear his voice in the flicker of the flames, steady, patient, tired. When I finally placed the ledger into the fire, the pages curled instantly, edges glowing red before turning to ash. The sound was soft, like paper sighing. I thought I'd feel relief, but all I felt was the cold. The snow outside had stopped falling, but the air was sharp enough to cut through bone. I opened the cabin door and stepped into the morning. The world was silent again, buried in white. The lake shimmered in the pale light, the same lake where I'd found his message, the same ice that had hidden his truth for so long. I walked to the edge and sat down. The cold seeped through my jeans, numbing everything it touched. I pulled the cassette recorder from my pocket, rewound the tape, and played it again, just to hear his voice. It cracked through the static like something holy. I didn't lie, he said. I promised I'd come back before winter. I closed my eyes. I could almost see him, standing by the workbench, sleeves rolled up, engine grease on his hands, smiling that half smile that never quite reached his eyes. The kind of smile people wear when they already know how the story ends. I thought about my mother, how she'd carried her guilt in silence for all those years, how every time she looked at me, she must have seen the face of the man she'd been forced to destroy. Maybe that's why she'd kept her distance. Maybe that's why she'd never forgiven herself enough to come home. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt tired. The ring on my finger had warmed slightly, as if the metal had learned to hold heat after all. I twisted it once, twice, and whispered into the wind, "You can rest now." A sound echoed behind me, soft footsteps crunching over snow. I turned, half expecting to see ghosts. But it was her, my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, wrapped in a grey coat, her hair streaked with silver. Her eyes found mine and froze there, eyes that had once terrified me with their distance, now fragile, human. "I didn't think you'd come," I said quietly. "I told myself I wouldn't," she answered. Her voice was barely louder than the wind. "But you have your father's stubbornness." We stood in silence, the kind that stretches years thin until they almost break. Then she stepped closer. "You found it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Everything." Her gaze dropped to the snow. "Then you know what I did." "I know why you did it," I said. She closed her eyes, and a single tear slid down her cheek. "He begged me to. Said they'd take you if I didn't." "I saw it," I said softly. "The video." Her breath caught. She turned away, shoulders shaking. I've replayed that night every day since. Every time I heard the wind hit the windows, I thought it was him coming back. "He did," I said. "Just not the way we thought." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded photo, old and worn. It was the same picture I'd found in the house, the three of us standing by the truck. But this one had writing on the back, in my father's hand, for when winter ends. She handed it to me. He always said winter wasn't a season. It was a state of mind. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts. "Then maybe it's time it ends," she nodded, and for a second, just a second, I saw the mother I remembered. The one who used to hum while making coffee, who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. We stood side by side, watching the fire consume what was left of the ledger. Smoke rose into the pale sky, twisting like a soul set free. After a while, she said quietly, "What will you do now?" I looked out at the horizon, where the ice began to crack under the first thin rays of sunlight. "Start over," I said. "Somewhere no one knows our name." She nodded again, and I could see the relief in her eyes. Not peace, not yet, but something close. We stayed until the fire burned down to nothing. The ashes scattered into the wind, disappearing across the lake. When I finally turned to leave, I took one last look at the sky. The snow had stopped. The air smelled of pine and smoke. Somewhere in that silence, I thought I heard his voice again, faint, carried by the wind. "Keep moving, son." I smiled through the ache. "I will." As I walked away, the ice beneath my feet began to crack softly, whispering its farewell. The sun was climbing now, slow but certain, turning the white landscape into gold. And for the first time since he'd left, I felt it, the beginning of the thaw. If this story reached your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe, comment what part stayed with you the most, and share it with someone who still waits for a promise that was never kept. Because sometimes remembering is the only way to keep them alive.